I knew something was wrong the moment he walked into the hospital room without looking at our newborn daughter. That was the first thought that scraped across my heart like a dull knife. He didn't come toward the bassinet. He didn't lean over her the way new fathers always did on those soft, trembling legs. He didn't even smile. Instead, he stood by the door, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes darting around the room, as if I had invited him into a stranger's house instead of our daughter's first day on earth. I remember adjusting myself on the stiff hospital bed, wincing a little, thinking maybe the painkillers were making me misread things. After all, the last 24 hours had been a blur of sweat, screams, and prayers whispered into my own fists. Maybe I was simply raw, too emotional, too open. But then he spoke. "How are you feeling?" His voice was flat, polite, the way you speak to the bank teller or a relative you barely know. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy staring at his face, searching for the softness I knew, the warmth I married, the boyish grin he always had when he was nervous. None of it was there, just a strange stiffness, like someone had pressed pause on the man I loved and replaced him with the shadow that wore his clothes. "I'm okay," I finally said. "She's okay too. She opened her eyes this morning. You missed it." He nodded once, eyes flicking toward the window instead of our daughter. A knot pulled tight inside me. The room felt suddenly cold, even though the radiator hummed beneath the window and the faint smell of disinfectant still clung to the air. I wanted him to just walk toward the baby, hold her, cradle her, do anything that made sense. But he didn't move, not even a step. And that was the moment, before I ever knew the truth, before the lies began to unwrap themselves, that an uneasy whisper began to settle somewhere deep under my ribs. Something has changed. But I didn't listen. Not then. Not after giving birth. Not with hormones flooding through me and exhaustion weighing down my eyelids. So I took a shaky breath, forced a smile, and pretended everything was fine. Normal life, before everything cracked. Before that day in the delivery ward, my life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We lived in a small, sunlit house at the edge of town, the kind of place you grow into, not the kind you dream about. It had peeling wallpaper in the hallway and a kitchen faucet that groaned like an old auntie whenever you turned it on. But it had warmth, the kind that comes from shared meals, shared laughter, shared routines. Every morning, I would wake up first. I loved that quiet space before the day began. I'd let the kettle boil while I washed rice for breakfast, listening to the slow drip of water against the metal bowl. My husband would stumble in, wearing the same worn t-shirt he slept in, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, yawning like a lion and leaning against the counter just to watch me move around the kitchen. "You make mornings taste better," he'd always say. Those were the kinds of lines that made me fall harder for him than I ever admitted aloud. We weren't rich, but we had dreams. We weren't perfect, but we had partnership. We weren't without problems, but we had the kind of understanding that made marriage feel like a safe harbor. At least, that's what I believed. Our wedding gifts, the ones that would later become the center of my heartbreak, were a mixture of sentimental and practical. My mother gave us her grandmother's silver bangles. His sister gifted us a beautiful Persian-style rug. Friends brought crockery sets, appliances, envelopes with thoughtful messages inside. To me, those gifts weren't just objects. They were blessings, pieces of love handed to us for building a future. Even when money was tight, I never once imagined he'd touch them. Never. If you told me then that the man I cooked for, the man I laughed with, the man I trusted would take every one of those gifts and sell them while I lay in a hospital bed struggling to bring his daughter into the world, I would have laughed at you. Kamal was responsible. Kamal was proud. Kamal was always telling me, "We'll find our way, don't worry." But hindsight has a cruel habit of stitching together clues we didn't want to see in the moment. In the months leading up to my delivery, there were signs, small, quiet signs. Ones I brushed aside because I believed love gave the benefit of the doubt. He worked late more often. He kept his phone face down. He was jumpy whenever I walked into the room unexpectedly. He smelled of cigarette smoke even though he'd supposedly quit. But pregnancy is its own kind of fog. It makes you pick your battles carefully, tell yourself that stress is temporary, and trust your partner to carry the load when you're too tired to lift your own. I thought he was just overwhelmed. I thought he was preparing to be a father. I thought, well, I thought wrong. Still, nothing, absolutely nothing prepared me for what I would discover later. Nothing told me that while I lay with stitches aching and a newborn in my arms, Kamal was making decisions that would dismantle the life we built. But back then, I didn't know any of it. Back then, I was just a new mother staring at her baby girl, whispering prayers over her tiny fingers, believing the world was still whole, and believing my husband still loved us. The first hint, a strange visit. It happened 2 days after giving birth. I was sitting upright for the first time, brushing my daughter's hair with the soft baby brush the nurse gave me. The room smelled like warm cotton and milk. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting lines across the floor like soft bars of gold. That's when Kamal walked in again. But this time, he wasn't alone. A man I had never seen before followed him inside. He carried a clipboard and gave me a nod that was too formal, too professional for a hospital visit. "Who's this?" I asked, tightening my grip on my daughter. Kamal cleared his throat. "Just someone helping with paperwork." But the man didn't approach me. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't hand me anything. Instead, he lifted the clipboard and asked Kamal, "And the other items, they were included, right? The ones from the list?" "The list?" I repeated softly. Kamal shot the man a quick look, the kind men give each other when they've accidentally let a secret slip. The stranger immediately clamped his lips shut. "It's nothing," Kamal said too quickly. "Just insurance forms." What insurance forms? And why did the man look so nervous? I felt my stomach twist, but I reminded myself I was tired, hormonal, probably imagining things. Still, a small tremor of fear fluttered at the edge of my thoughts. A fear I pushed down because I desperately wanted to believe my husband had everything under control. But that was the first whisper, the first crack, the first sign that all was not what it seemed. And soon, that whisper would become a scream. The man with the clipboard left quickly, too quickly, and as soon as the door clicked shut behind him, the room felt strangely hollow. Even the beeping of the monitor near my bed seemed louder, sharper, slicing through the silence between Kamal and me. I looked at him, really looked. His face had always been easy to read, soft around the eyes, open around the mouth, the kind of face that confessed emotions without being asked. But that day, something was off. His jaw was tighter. His shoulders were stiff, pulled upward in a defensive posture. And his eyes? They wouldn't stay still. They bounced around the room like they were searching for escape routes. "Kamal," I said gently, trying to keep my voice steady. "What list was he talking about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up the water jug from the side table, poured me a glass, and placed it in my hand as if I had asked for it. I watched his fingers. They trembled slightly. It was subtle, but I saw it. I always noticed things about him. "Nothing you need to worry about right now," he said finally. "Just rest. Focus on the baby." But the words sounded rehearsed, not like comfort, like avoidance. Still, I swallowed my questions. My body was aching. My stitches throbbed with every small movement, and I felt the kind of exhaustion that sits inside your bones. I didn't have the energy to fight or interrogate him. I told myself it was okay to let it go for now. But even then, even in my foggy state, the uneasiness stayed. It lingered like the metallic taste of hospital air. That night, after he left, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the soft breaths of my daughter and the distant footsteps of nurses in the hallway. Every shadow, every sound, every flicker of light from the machines made me replay the scene again and again. The list, the items, his trembling hands. My heart whispered what my mind refused to shape into words. What has he done? Going home. I was discharged the next morning. Kamal picked me up, holding the car door open with a formality that felt unfamiliar. We drove home mostly in silence, the kind that doesn't soothe, but suffocates. The only sounds were the car's engine and the occasional soft whimper from the baby as she slept in her carrier beside me. When we reached the house, I felt a small rush of comfort. Home. Familiar. Safe. Or so I thought. Kamal helped me inside, carrying the baby while I took slow steps toward the living room. But as I crossed the threshold, a strange feeling washed over me, like stepping into a place that looked the same but felt completely wrong. The living room was empty. Not bare, but hollow, lacking something. I couldn't place it, not at first. Everything was in its place, but somehow it felt like the soul of the room was missing. It took me a moment to realize why. The rug. The beautiful rug my sister-in-law had gifted us at our wedding, the one Kamal insisted should be the centerpiece of the room, was gone. "Where's the rug?" I asked, frowning. He didn't look up. He was adjusting the baby's blanket. "Oh, I took it for cleaning. It had some stains." I blinked. "Stains? We barely used it." "Yeah, but, dust, dirt, it builds up." But something about the way he avoided my eyes made my skin prickle. I walked further inside, scanning the shelves, the corners, the sofa, the cabinet where we kept gifts from our wedding, and that's when the second jolt hit me. The silver bangles, my mother's heirloom, the one she gave me at our wedding, were missing. From the display box. "Kamal," I said slowly, "did you move the bangles?" He stiffened. "Which bangles?" "My mother's bangles. The one she gave me at our wedding." "Oh, yeah, I put them away. Didn't want them lying around while we're busy with the baby." "But they were inside the display box. Safe." "Yeah, well, I just thought it was better this way." I stared at him, trying to understand, trying to believe. But uneasiness tugged at me again. The man with the clipboard, the list, the missing rug, the missing bangles. My chest tightened, hard. I said quietly, "Show me." He froze. "Show you what?" "Show me where you put the bangles." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, like someone had dropped a blanket over the room, smothering all the air out of it. "Kamal," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my effort to remain calm. He finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my stomach drop. Guilt. "Kamal," I repeated, "where are they?" He swallowed, hard. And then he lied. "They're in the drawer." I held his gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Okay, let's see." He hesitated just for a flicker of a second, but enough to make my blood run cold. Before turning toward the bedroom, I followed him.
each step feeling heavier than the one before, as if the truth itself was pulling me downward. When we reached the drawer, he opened it quickly, almost too quickly, rummaging through as if he could magically summon the bangles if he just moved things around enough. But the drawer was empty. Empty except for some old photographs, a cracked hairbrush, and a stray button. Kamal's shoulders slumped. I must have put them somewhere else," he muttered. My voice sounded distant even to myself. "You sold them, didn't you?" He didn't answer. Not with words. Not with confession. Not with explanation. But with silence. A silence that screamed the truth. My knees weakened. I grabbed the edge of the dresser for support, my vision blurring as tears burned behind my eyes. My mother's bangles. My heritage. The last piece of her I had left. Gone. Kamal, how could you? My voice broke on the last word. He closed his eyes. I didn't have a choice. The anger that rose in me was quick, sharp, fiery, but beneath it was something far heavier, a grief I could barely swallow. "You always have a choice," I whispered. But even then, even after realizing he'd sold one of the most precious things I owned, I still didn't know the full truth. I still didn't know it was worse. Much worse. Bigger than a bangle, bigger than a rug, bigger than anything I had imagined. I still didn't know he hadn't just sold a few items. He had sold everything. Every wedding gift, every sentimental piece, every blessing our families gave us. And he had done it while I was laboring in a delivery ward, bringing his child into the world. That truth, I would learn soon. But first, I had to live through the moment that fractured our marriage beyond repair.
For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt too small, the air too thin, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with the thick, suffocating weight of betrayal. The open drawer stared back at me, empty, hollow, the same way I suddenly felt inside. Kamal still hadn't moved. He stood frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the drawer, the other trembling at his side. I studied his face, looking for even a sliver of remorse that felt real, a flicker of the man I had trusted enough to build a life with. But all I saw was dread. "Kamal," I said, my voice cracking. "What else did you sell?" His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. That silence, it terrified me more than any confession could. I stepped back, trying to steady myself, though every instinct in my body screamed that something was terribly, terribly wrong. I could feel the faint pull of my stitches as I moved, the dull ache in my abdomen mixing with the sharp sting of panic. "I'm asking you," I whispered. "What else?" He exhaled shakily. "Please, just sit. You need to rest." "No," I said, my voice rising despite the exhaustion weighing down every cell in my body. "I need the truth." He pressed his palms to his eyes for a second. When he dropped them, his face looked tired, older almost, but that didn't soften me. Not this time. He turned toward the wardrobe, opened one door. I felt my breath catch. Inside, there were empty spaces where things should have been, glaring blank spots between my folded clothes, beneath the neatly stacked bed linens, beside the boxes labeled with memories from our wedding. Gifts, cards, jewelry, photo frames. "Kamal, where are the boxes? Where were the gold-plated utensils my uncle had sent from Dubai? Where was the velvet box containing the silver set his mother had given me? Where was the framed Quran cover? Where were the envelopes of shagun money we had received? I turned to him slowly, fear and fury swirling like a storm inside me. Kamal, I said, my voice barely a breath. All of this, did you sell everything? His eyes glistened, and that tiny shimmer, that single moment of cracked composure was the answer I dreaded. Yes, he whispered. I sold them. The room tilted. I gripped the wardrobe door to keep myself upright as a wave of dizziness punched through me. Why? He said. I didn't want to, he quickly said, voice cracking. But I had no choice. You keep saying that, I snapped, my voice slicing through the air. What does that even mean? What could possibly force you to sell our entire marriage, my mother's bangles, our gifts, our memories? He hesitated, and that hesitation terrified me even more. Kamal, I said slowly, were you in trouble? He was silent. My mind spiraled, possibilities firing like alarms. Debt? Gambling? Blackmail? Something worse? He finally began to speak, but not in one clean explanation. His words came in broken pieces, a mosaic of panic. He sold, it started small, just a loan, for a friend. I thought I could pay it back quickly. My stomach twisted. A loan? From who? A man I work with. He said he knew a way to make some extra money. I trusted him. And I pushed. And then it went wrong. He sold selling some things would be enough. A few? I said, the word breaking in my throat. There's nothing left. He swallowed. Every day the man was demanding more. He started threatening to come to the house. I panicked. So you sold everything we owned? I whispered. He sold the things we wouldn't immediately need. I told myself I'd buy them back. I told myself it was temporary. I felt something inside me snap, quietly, cleanly, the way a delicate thread breaks under too much weight. Temporary? I repeated, numb. You think you can just buy back memories? Replace the things my mother touched? The heirlooms passed down for generations? He said, I just wanted to protect you. Protect me, I whispered, my voice trembling with the kind of grief that was far deeper than anger. You betrayed me while I was in labor, while I was bringing our child into the world. His face crumpled, but I didn't care. Not now. The betrayal was too raw, too deep, too freshly carved into my heart. I need to go, I said, suddenly, turning away. Where? His voice was frantic. Anywhere but here. You're not well. Don't you dare tell me what I am, I snapped, spinning back towards him. You lied to me. You stole from me. You let me step into this house thinking we had built a life together when you were tearing it apart piece by piece. Kamal stepped towards me. Please, just listen. No, I said, you listen. I will not stay here tonight. Not with you. Not in this house full of empty spaces. I picked up my phone, the only thing that still felt like mine, and walked toward the door. Kamal reached from my arm but stopped himself just before touching me. His hand hovered in the air, trembling, unsure. Where will you go? He asked, his voice breaking. To my aunt's house. She'll take me in. He swallowed hard. And the baby? The baby. My child. My daughter. I looked at her, sleeping peacefully in her carrier by the sofa, unaware of the storm unraveling around her. The thought of taking her with me in my condition terrified me. The thought of leaving her here with him terrified me even more. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I would never abandon her. I lifted her gently, cradling her against my chest.
The moment her warmth touched me, something inside me steadied, my breathing slowed, my heart softened, but not towards Kamal, towards her, towards myself, towards survival. Without another word, I walked toward the door. Khadijah, he whispered behind me, voice cracking into shards. Please don't leave. I paused, not because I was reconsidering, but because something inside me suddenly sharpened, a new realization, a new fear. I turned back slowly. Kamal, I said in a low, steady voice, is the debt paid? He didn't answer. My heart slammed against my ribs. Kamal, I repeated, barely breathing. Is the debt paid? He lowered his eyes. No, he said, not all of it. A cold chill ran through me. How much is left? I whispered. He looked at me with eyes full of terror. 3 lakhs. My blood turned to ice. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't over. Not even close.
The hallway outside our apartment felt colder than it ever had. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above me as I held my daughter close, her tiny breaths warm against my collarbone. My hands trembled, but my feet kept moving, guided by instinct more than strength. Behind me, I could hear Kamal's footsteps, hesitant, afraid, unsure if he should follow or let me go. Khadijah, he said softly, his voice echoing off the stairwell walls. Just wait, please. I didn't tell you everything. I stopped midway down the stairs, gripping the railing as a fresh wave of dizziness rolled through me. The stitches in my abdomen pulled sharply, reminding me I was barely 2 days out of the delivery ward. My body felt fragile, too fragile for this kind of heartbreak. I turned just enough to look at him. Only his face, not his hands. The hands that had sold our life away. What haven't you told me? I asked, my voice thin and tired. What more could there possibly be? He hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a knife slipping between my ribs. The man I owe. Kamal swallowed hard as if his throat had dried completely. He knows where we live. A chill slid down my spine. He's been threatening to come to the house. I felt my knees weaken. My grip on the railing tightened until my fingers ached. And you let me bring our newborn here? You let me walk into this without a word? I thought he would stop once I gave him the first payment. I didn't want to scare you. You had just given birth. I thought I could fix it. I thought I had more time. You thought, but you didn't tell. I couldn't breathe for a moment. It felt as if the walls around me were closing in, squeezing my lungs until every breath hurt. No, I said firmly, I'm not staying here another second. Kamal looked genuinely afraid. Let me at least walk you downstairs. I shook my head. No, stay where you are. He stopped immediately, his shoulders collapsing. I shifted my daughter higher against my chest and continued down the stairs, step by slow step, fighting against the pain pulling at my abdomen. I had never felt weaker physically, but something inside me, something deeper, had never been stronger. When I reached the bottom of the stairwell, I pushed open the building door and stepped into the cool night air. It smelled faintly of rain, the kind that hangs heavy but hasn't yet fallen. The street was mostly quiet, a few distant scooters humming through the darkness. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was my aunt. I answered with a shaky breath.
Auntie, can I come over? Of course, Beta. Whatever happened? A tear slid down my cheek. I'll explain when I get there. Come, I'll warm the room for you and the baby. Drive safe. I hung up and wiped my cheek, though the tears kept coming anyway. I reached the curb and stood there for a moment, unsure whether my legs could carry me farther. My daughter shifted slightly in her sleep, letting out a small sigh that pierced my heart. She deserved safety, stability, a home without fear. I hailed a rickshaw. The driver glanced at me, at the baby, at the hour, and something in his expression softened. Sit, madame, slowly. As the rickshaw pulled away, I didn't look back at the building. I couldn't, because I knew if I saw Kamal standing in that doorway, begging with his eyes, I might falter. My heart wasn't made of stone. I loved him once, deeply. We hadn't been strangers shoved together. We were partners, friends, companions in every little detail of life. But betrayal changes people. It changes marriages. It changes trust. As the rickshaw wove through the quiet streets, memories began unraveling inside me. Memories of Kamal before all of this. His gentle voice during ultrasound appointments. The way he held my hair when morning sickness kept me on the bathroom floor. The way he stroked my feet after long days at work. The way he whispered, "We'll be the best parents," as he kissed my belly. So when had the fear entered his eyes? When had desperation replaced joy? When had his shoulders begun to carry a weight I never saw until it crushed us both? I don't know. But I knew this. The man I married would never have sold our wedding gifts. Not the bangles my mother blessed with tears in her eyes. Not the silver dishes his own mother pressed into my palms with trembling pride. Not the framed Quran verse she hung in our living room. Not anything sacred, anything irreplaceable. He had become someone I didn't recognize. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure he recognized himself either. The rickshaw slowed in front of my aunt's apartment building. The lights inside were warm and golden, spilling onto the courtyard like a welcome embrace. She was already waiting at the entrance, wrapped in her shawl, her hair tied in a loose bun. Her eyes widened when she saw my face. "Oh, child," she whispered, reaching for me as if I were still 10 years old and crying over scraped knees. "Come, give me the baby. You're trembling." I passed my daughter into her arms, and my aunt cradled her with the tenderness only someone who has truly loved and lost can hold. Once upstairs, she guided me into the spare room. The sheets were freshly spread. A soft nightlight glowed near the bed. Everything felt gentle, safe, familiar. I sank onto the mattress, feeling my body finally surrender to exhaustion. "What happened?" she asked softly. And just like that, the dam broke. I told her everything. The empty apartment, the missing gifts, the debt, the threats, the betrayal. All of it. She sat quietly, not interrupting, not judging, only listening with eyes full of heartbreak. When I finally finished, she placed her hand over mine. You did the right thing by leaving tonight. Fear has no place around you or your child. My throat tightened. But what do I do now? She squeezed my hand. You rest tonight. Tomorrow we decide. As she stood and gently closed the door, I lay there in the quiet room, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since discovering the truth, I allowed myself to cry. Not from betrayal, not from anger, but from the overwhelming realization that my life had split into a before and an after. And I didn't know yet which side I would live on.
I woke the next morning to the soft hum of my aunt's ceiling fan and the faint scent of cardamom tea drifting under the bedroom door. My body felt stiff, not from the bed, but from the weight of everything I had carried the night before. My daughter was asleep in a bassinet beside my bed, her tiny fingers curled gently near her cheek. For a moment, watching her breathe, the world felt still, like time had paused long enough for me to gather myself again. But then the memories crept back in, the empty apartment, the sold gifts, the threats, Kamal's broken voice. A knot tightened in my chest. I sat up slowly, pressing my palm against the tender spot on my abdomen. My stitches protested the movement. My body was healing, but my heart felt as if it had only just begun to break. My aunt tapped lightly on the door before pushing it open. She carried a tray with tea and 2 slices of soft bread spread with butter. "You need strength," she said, placing the tray on the side table. "Not just for yourself, for her too." She glanced at the baby and smiled softly. I nodded and took the cup, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. "Thank you," I murmured. "Did he call?" I turned my phone off last night." "You can turn it on now," she said gently, "but only if you want to." I took a deep breath and unlocked my phone. 8 missed calls, 10 messages, 3 voicemails. My chest tightened. My aunt reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "Whatever he has to say will still be there after breakfast. For now, eat." Her calmness grounded me, so I nodded and took a small bite of bread, even though my appetite felt miles away. But before I could finish, my phone buzzed again. A new message. From Kamal. "Please come home. It's not safe for you to be out. I'll explain everything." My stomach twisted. The words weren't comforting. They were frightening. Not safe. The man he owed money to, was this a threat or a warning? My aunt leaned over just enough to glance at the screen, her brows knitting together. "Sit," she said firmly. "Eat first. We'll deal with this step by step." I nodded, though my hands were trembling so badly I had to set the tea down. Later, after I'd eaten what I could, I listened to the voicemails. First message. "Kadisha, I'm sorry. Please, just come back. We can talk." Second message. "I shouldn't have hidden things, I know, but selling the gifts, I didn't know what else to do." Third message. His voice lower, shakier.
He came to the building tonight. He was asking neighbors if they'd seen me. I don't know what to do." A cold wave washed through me. My aunt stood quietly, her arms folded, her eyes sharp with concern. "This has gone far beyond selling gifts. You cannot go home." I nodded, because deep down I already knew that. But knowing and accepting are two very different things. My marriage, the life I had built, was unraveling thread by thread. We spent most of that morning sitting at her dining table. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, catching the dust motes as they floated lazily through the air. It was a peaceful room, the kind that made you feel safe enough to breathe deeply again. My aunt handed me her notebook and pen. She said, "We'll make a plan. When life shakes you this hard, you don't stand on your feelings, you stand on a plan." I almost smiled. That was her way. Practical, steady, solid. She said, "First, we need to know the full truth." My hands tightened around the pen. "You think Kamal will tell me?" "You think he won't," she countered gently. "Child, desperate people lie, but frightened people, they tell the truth." Her words settled uncomfortably in my chest. I didn't want to see Kamal frightened. I didn't want any of this. But wanting had nothing to do with reality now. "Call him," she said softly. "Put it on speaker. I'll stay right here." I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the call button. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then I pressed it. Kamal answered before the first ring finished. "Khadisha? Oh, thank God. Where are you? Are you safe?" His voice cracked with something I didn't expect to hear. Fear. Real, raw fear. "I'm with family," I said quietly, "and I'm not coming home until you tell me everything." There was a pause on the other end, a long, heavy silence. Then, "Okay, I'll tell you. Just don't hang up." I glanced at my aunt. She nodded for me to continue. "Who is this man?" His answer came slowly, like each word hurt to say. "He's a moneylender." My chest tightened. "Not a bank, not a legal lender. Someone from the old neighborhood." My aunt closed her eyes briefly, the lines on her forehead deepening. "How much?" I asked. Kamal's voice broke. 6 lakhs. The room spun for a moment. I gripped the edge of the dining table to steady myself. My aunt reached over and covered my hand with hers. "Why would you borrow that much?" I whispered. He went quiet. Too quiet. "Kamal," I said firmly, "tell me." Another long pause, then, "My cousin. He needed surgery. Urgently. And I didn't want to tell you because you were pregnant and already stressed and we didn't have savings and you thought selling our wedding gifts was the solution?" I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. He exhaled shakily. I panicked. "I made everything worse. I know." My aunt mouthed silently. "Ask him if the cousin is even real." I swallowed. "Which cousin?" He hesitated. Too long. "Rafiq. From Karachi." My aunt's eyes narrowed. She mouthed again. "There is no Rafiq." And she was right. I'd met every one of Kamal's cousins, weddings, funerals, Eid dinners. There was no Rafiq. Not in Karachi. Not anywhere. A cold realization settled in the pit of my stomach. He wasn't just hiding things. He was lying. "Kamal," I whispered, my voice trembling, "don't lie to me again. There is no Rafiq." Silence. A long, suffocating silence. Then, "I didn't want you to know the truth," he said finally. "The truth is worse." My aunt straightened in her chair. I held my breath. "What truth?" He inhaled sharply, and then the words tumbled out, broken and brittle. "I borrowed it to start a side business, a real one, with a partner. But he cheated me, ran off with the money. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think I was a failure before the baby came. And then the moneylender showed up. And my stomach twisted into knots. "Kamal," I whispered, "why didn't you tell me any of this? Why carry it alone?" His voice cracked. "Because I didn't want you to be ashamed of me." A tear slipped down my cheek. But before I could respond, he said quietly, "He's coming back today."
"He's coming back today," Kamal repeated, his voice thin, almost hollow, like the words had been scraped straight out of his fear. The dining room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls had inched closer without warning. My aunt and I exchanged a look, hers sharp and assessing, mine wide with dread. "When today?" she asked, leaning slightly toward the phone, her tone calm but edged with steel. I don't know," Kamal stammered. "He said by evening." My aunt inhaled slowly, then exhaled through her nose the way she did whenever something required quick thinking. "Kamal, listen to me," she said firmly. "You must not be alone when he comes. Do you hear me?" I can't involve anyone," he said, sounding panicked. If I make this worse." "It's already worse," I whispered. He went silent. For a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat, steady but strained, like it was carrying too much weight. I looked down at my hands, trembling slightly against the edge of the table. I felt my daughter shift in the bassinet behind me, letting out a soft, sleepy murmur. Her innocence in all this, that was the part that broke me the most. "Kamal," I said quietly, "I don't understand one thing. If you were so afraid, so desperate, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" His breath shook audibly. "I didn't know how," he said, voice breaking. "I thought I could fix it before you found out, before the baby came, before I messed everything up so badly." I closed my eyes. "Keeping it secret," I said gently, "is what messed everything up." He let out a soft sob, one he tried to muffle, but it reached us anyway. I know. My aunt leaned closer to me. "Ask him what he plans to do when this man comes." I nodded, wiping a tear from my cheek. "Kamal, what are you going to do when he shows up?" I don't know," he whispered. "That's why I need you home. I need you with me." My chest tightened. "I can't bring a newborn into danger." "I would never let anything happen to you," he cried. "I already did," I said softly. The silence after that was heavy. Not angry, not cold, just defeated. Like two people sitting on opposite sides of a broken bridge, knowing neither could cross safely anymore. My aunt finally spoke. "Kamal, listen to me. She is not coming back there until this is handled properly. You need help." "No police," he said immediately. "If they get involved, he'll..." He stopped abruptly. "He'll what?" I demanded. Kamal's voice dropped to a whisper. He said if I involve the police, he'll come after my family. The room seemed to tilt. After my family. After us. My aunt's jaw tightened. "And you think calling my niece back home to that risk is the solution?" "No," he said helplessly. I don't know what to do." My aunt pressed her palm over mine. "You are not alone," she said quietly, "but you must tell us everything. No more lies. Kamal inhaled shakily. There's nothing else, I promise. My aunt gave me a subtle look, one that she doubted that completely. And honestly, so did I. But for now, we had enough truth to work with. I'll call you later, I said softly. Khadijah, please. I will call, I repeated, firmer. But I can't come home right now. There's a long pause, then a defeated whisper. Okay. I ended the call and set the phone down gently, even though my hands were trembling. For a moment, everything in me sunk, like my heart had slipped straight into my stomach, leaving a hollow ache behind. My aunt sat beside me and reached for the notebook again. Now, we plan. But before she could even open it, a knock came at her door. Not loud, not aggressive, just a firm, steady knock. My heart jumped. My aunt held up a fan. Stay here. She slipped out of the dining room and padded down the hallway. I listened intently, every nerve in my body tightening like drawn wires. I heard the door creak open, a brief murmured exchange, then footsteps approaching again. My aunt returned with my cousin, her eldest son, Ibrahim. A tall man with kind eyes, but the sturdy build of someone who knew how to hold his ground. I got your message, he said, stepping inside. What happened? My aunt handed him the notebook filled with our scribbled half-plan. Read. While he skimmed through it, I explained the missing gifts, the debt, the threats, all of it. As I spoke, his brows knitted closer and closer together. When he finished, he closed the notebook with a deliberate calm. Okay, he said, I know the type of man you're dealing with. We need to be smart. My breath hitched. Smart how? First, he said, you're staying here. You and the baby, no question. I nodded, relief flickering through me. Second, he said, I'm going to Kamal's place, now. My heart lurched. No, you can't go alone. He shook his head. I'm not going to fight him. I'm going to assess. I need to know who this man is, how serious he is, and what he wants. It's dangerous, I whispered. Ibrahim met my eyes. Steady, grounded, not reckless. Dangerous is letting you return home with your newborn to a man who might show up unannounced. My throat tightened. My aunt placed a hand on my shoulder. He's right. Ibrahim grabbed his keys and headed toward the door. I'll call you from the building. Stay near your phone. As he left, the room felt charged with electricity, the kind that comes before a storm. My aunt sat beside me and let out a slow breath. This will be hard, she said softly, but it will lead you somewhere safer than where you were. I leaned back, feeling my baby stirring gently beside me. I don't know how to face Kamal after this, I whispered. You don't have to know today, she said. Today, you only need to breathe. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A message from Ibrahim. I'm here. His door is open. My stomach dropped. My aunt placed her hand over mine again, grounding me just as fear began to claw its way at my throat. Open it, she said gently. I tapped the message. Another bubble appeared immediately.